All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Finance Village, where we explore how real people and professionals are transforming the financial advice experience. I'm here with my co host, Sean Adeyemi. I'm your host, Sheldon Bro, and we have a wonderful guest with us today. Today, we're digging into a topic that affects every household, but rarely gets the care that it deserves: cash flow. Not the rigid kind with meticulous spreadsheets and shame, but the kind that actually makes sense for real life. And joining us is one of my personal heroes in the cash flow space that approaches it very uniquely and I think in a very meaningful way. Maura Shaftoe, a certified cash flow specialist, but also taken the initiative to get the very respected qualified associate financial planner certification. And she's on a mission to help Canadians take the stress out of their financial lives. And through her coaching practice, Maura works with individuals, families, business owners, and helps them align their money with their values without the shame, because she knows that money isn't just math, but it's very emotional, it's personal, and it's deeply tied to how we see ourselves, for the good and the bad, and what we believe is possible. So, with a background in financial planning and behavior based coaching, Maura really helps clients build confidence, clarity, and financial awareness on their own terms. And her approach empowers people to be able to take a meaningful action towards the lives that they want to live and not have that burden in the background of having only 30% enjoyment of your daily activities because you have that weight on the back of your shoulders. So even if they're starting out without big portfolios or polished spreadsheets, she calls it doing money like it makes sense. And today she's going to talk to us about that. So we're very grateful to have you and taking time out of your valuable schedule, Maura, and I'll let Sean get into the first question. But I just want to quickly check if I've highlighted your background sufficiently and accurately.
You have. In fact, I don't know if I have to say anything else. That was amazing, Sheldon.
Good, Sean. Then I'll let you get us into it.
Well, more as a fellow professional, we know that most financial professionals like us follow like a pretty standard path. We focus on investments, building assets. I'm more of a holistic planner, but speaking more like broad industry wide, most professionals focus on building assets under management and serving clients who already have wealth, right? But you've taken a different approach, stepping into the role of a money coach. Do you mind walking us through what that shift looked like for you and what does being a money coach actually mean compared to like the traditional financial advising?
Yeah, because as you know, Maura, most of these financial advisors, if you ask them who their ideal client is, it's the same answer. Well, doctors, lawyers, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'd like to go back a little bit farther to before I was in the financial services world. So I spent about 25 years in the auto industry, which was a great learning place. I did a lot of things in that industry, was a service manager, fleet manager, lease manager, my last business development manager, and then my last role was as a new car manager. And that's where I really started to see the impact. When I was selling cars, if someone came to me and I knew it wasn't the right time for them to buy a car based on what I was seeing, I would coach them. Let's get a little more money down. Let's do a couple of things. Come back to me. When
You're an
you're a new
alien.
Yeah. When you're a new car manager, if somebody brings you a deal and you can make the numbers work, that's your job.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I was seeing close and personal, the impact of these massive payments on people. And I decided to make a shift into the financial services world. I actually started in the insurance world because I felt I could help people more. And then as I increased my training, when I started to learn about behavioral finance, it's like a light bulb went on in my head. And I was like, okay, I know I can make a difference here. And one thing that you did say earlier, you said money is emotional. I like to make the distinction that we are emotional about money. Money is not emotional at all. Money has no emotion. In fact, money doesn't care about us. It's inert. It's a tool. And when we're not managing it well, it feels like a weapon. But money in itself holds no emotion. So recognizing that, okay, I've got some biases, behaviors, beliefs, whatever they are, that's impacting how I deal with my money, knew I could make a difference there.
Well, and quickly touch base on one thing that you're just making me think of as you share that insight is there is something that's I had never heard of it before. We've had a really great one on our podcast previously. It's very rare in Canada. They've got a few in the US, but it was a very meaningful conversation. I'll suggest people to go in and check out that episode or an earlier episode. We'll tag it on the bottom here, but there is a role that's kind of some people are getting into called the financial therapist. So that obviously is very tied to the psychology and the history of money. Most of us get our financial literacy from our parents. And there's, you're either it's kind of almost a lottery that you're born into with certain habits. So what is some of the nuance around the history of the psychology of money that you can get attached to and some of the experiences you've seen? And then what do you know about this financial therapist role, if anything?
I know a little bit about the financial therapist role, and I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach. So there's a difference there. And it can have some value if someone's got some really deep-rooted trauma around money or behaviors around money that they can't seem to unlock or shift. So I think there's definitely value there. And for a lot of people, I mean, your comment that we get our money education from our parents, we may not get any education from our parents, but we are definitely learning by watching,
Mhm.
right? But you can have
Habits, I
two
guess, would be the right
people in the
word. Yeah.
same family. I can think of one example of uh, uh, a person that I know. They lost their father at quite an early age. In the one case, the daughter she disconnected from her relationship with money. They didn't have a lot, right? And she's been in debt or struggling making it paycheck to paycheck her entire life. And the other person, money became a massive driver because he didn't want to be broke. Same family, same event, different
Different responses.
different response, right? So it can be about us personally, about our belief system, about what we think we deserve. There's so many layers to it, and people are a bit loath to talk about money, right? They would
Mhm.
rather talk about death, dying, drug addiction, extramarital affairs than money.
Sports. Yeah.
Sports. Yeah. Well, sports is a fun one.
Yeah, because
Right?
because because money is a sensitive topic, and sometimes there is if you don't have it, there is like Sheldon mentioned at the beginning, there's a kind of shame to it that you feel that you're not enough. You don't have enough to have those kind of money conversations, and sometimes you have too a lot of it, and it's not a conversation you want to have either because you're afraid that of opening up your finances to people. So when you approach you're coming from a different end of the spectrum where it's not simply about, okay, you have this assets under management, let's help you figure out how to maximize that, the tax planning. You're coming from those who may already have money, what I will sometimes even call Henrys, high earners, not rich yet, right? So they make all this money. What's your conversation like on, okay, so this is how much you're earning. Talk to me about how you try to get into the emotional side of things and try to pry out um, what's important to them, because that seems to be a big part of what you do and how you approach cash flow planning.
Yes. So I say that money, there's two parts to the money equation. There's the math, the arithmetic part of we need to know what the numbers are,
Can't
right?
hide from that.
We we have to understand those numbers. And then there's the other side. And so I usually never have to pry very much because it reveals itself.
Hmm.
And it starts revealing itself to the client. And then they start actually seeing it. So we'll have some conversations about this is what, for instance, I'll ask them to look at 3 months worth of expenses. And that can be the hardest thing that we're going to do together. For them to actually start saying, oh, and the one thing that I often ask is, how much do you think you're spending on groceries before they do any research? How much do you think you're spending on eating out? I get them to guess. They're never right.
They
That's a
always
great idea to
underestimate
do at
that.
the start just to see what they really believe.
Yes, to see what they really believe. And so then when they start looking at it, they're like, okay, this is what I say is important to me, but this is where I'm spending my money. So those two things aren't the same. As soon as somebody starts working with me, I often say, you will start making changes in the way that you're looking at money automatically, because now you're thinking about it. Now your mind is starting to answer questions. We may address what the triggers are. We may address, if eating out is the big thing, what it is in your lifestyle that is supporting this eating out all the time. Too busy, no meal planning, hate to cook, whatever it is. And then we're looking for strategies on how we're managing that, right?
Yeah.
And there's not only a divulging of everything to you, but I would think in my experience as a mortgage specialist, sometimes I've gotta had some awkward conversations between spouses when we're going to do a refinance, and one of them doesn't know about as much activity that's been happening on the other side because there's a couple top secret ninja cards over there, and, I guess there's also a process of now they're realizing that they're really gonna be accountable to their spouse in a way.
I call that financial infidelity,
Yeah.
right? So remember that when somebody comes to me, they're 95% of the time they're ready to do the work, right? They're ready to take it on.
Well,
So,
intention is the key for a good client, I find.
yeah, 100%. So,
What's the
yeah,
difference that you
sometimes
see with, even in, further answering that question? Because most people think that the people that need to budget are the people with the low incomes, but I would think it comes in all spectrums, medium and high income. I've seen some specialized surgeons that are cash flow messes that are making $500,000 a year.
Yeah.
right, there's this sort of feeling that if you're a high earner, you automatically know what to do with your money. And that's a conversation we need to shift.
Or
And
that
the
you
other
don't
thing
have to
too
care about
is,
it or pay much attention to it. I hear that from from fancy financial advisors. I hear that a lot. Well, my clients don't need to pay attention to that.
yes, maybe they don't need to pay attention to it now when they've got the cash flow coming. But when they move into retirement, if they haven't shifted any of that behavior, and now they've got a set amount of money that they're using to fund their lifestyle, th- there's going to be an issue, right? If their burn rate is still as high as it was when they
When they
were
were
working,
earning,
yeah,
they're in
when
trouble.
they were earning, right?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I've seen that exact circumstance with a doctor that had been a long-term client of mine on the mortgage side and had shifted into retirement. And a good point, that I'd like to highlight because I think a unideal, not ideal nature that we have as Canadians is that I've been with the bank for 40 years and blah blah blah. But like when you get into that situation when you've transitioned to retirement and now you're looking. They don't care if you've been with them for 100 years. If you don't fit into their tiny box, they're not going to help you with credit or anything else, and that ended up being a almost kind of a GoFundMe story within his community because of that transition with the same spending. It led to absolute
hmm
disaster.
hmm The other thing that I do coach people around, we do have a strong banking system in this country. So we are lucky in that way. But the other thing that I coach people around is banks are not your friend. They're running a business.
Hmm.
They are approving you based on a grid system. So someone with the same income, same credit history, same whatever is going to get the same rate. They're not your friend. This isn't like 25 years ago when you had the same banker for 5 years. Now you go and you don't even know who you're gonna be dealing with, right? So, it's important that people understand that when they're in a bank, this is a business transaction, and I wanna be as informed as I can be. I often set people up. Let's say we're looking at doing a refinance. I'm giving them the questions so that when they go to the bank, they can ask those questions and be informed.
Yeah, and
So,
that's a big opportunity cost when you don't know how to properly interact with your bank.
yeah,
Uh, One of the
and
big things that you go ahead.
because we're in the industry,
Oh,
we
you froze there.
we make assumptions. We make assumptions that it's not that difficult. This is what we do all day, but it's not what they do all day.
One thing I can tell you is that everybody and their mother that thinks they have a good credit score, even if they have no income, they think they'll be approved for everything.
Well, yes.
Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just thinking about like the issue of cash flow and behavior is like you rightfully said, it's not limited to whether you have or you don't have. It's a behavioral thing that cuts across many spectrums. And I guess part of what's at the back of my mind for you is when you're looking at the cash flow planner, right? It's the traditional spreadsheets that you're looking at the where how the monies add up. Like, what's your approach in terms of what's how's your approach different to traditional budgeting, right? Rather,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. So I don't use a budget. Budgets are great for a few things. They're great for planning a wedding, great for planning a big trip, great for planning a renovation on your house. But here's the thing about budgets. We can see all the capital projects that get done by our government, how many of them actually come in under budget? When we're renovating our kitchen, do we come in under budget or do we automatically build a buffer in, right? And yet on our
hmm
personal budget, we don't build a buffer. And if you can't manage a budget, then there's obviously something wrong with you. I mean, it's not that difficult to manage a budget, right? That's the
hmm
kind of narrative people get around budgets. So I don't use a budget with my clients. What I do ask is, let's get an idea of the average spend. We talk through some of the annual things that could come up that aren't on your radar, right?
I mean, there's not a exact science every month, and there's random things that can come up.
Exactly,
Sean,
every
right?
single month.
yeah.
Yes. Somebody said to me just the other day, well, yeah, I had a bit of a surprise. I've got school fees for some things that are coming up. I said, that's not a surprise. That's just something you haven't been anticipating.
Yes, and it's like when you call those call centers, and you're calling those call centers for, like, let's say it's the 10th year you're calling them, and you're still calling them, and you're getting we have higher than anticipated call volumes. At some point, it becomes anticipated. That's why I never understood road rage. You're shocked when you left the house and you thought there was gonna be somebody that was gonna do a bad driving move. There's no need for that rage because it's to be anticipated with
Expected.
basic
Yes.
logic.
Yes. And we are kind of bad at anticipating. So, what I'm looking for is what are the committed expenses? How do we make sure all the things that need to be paid are paid? Do we have enough cash flow for that? Right? Is there enough money there to look after all the committed expenses? And then we've got a base number that we're working with there. That number does not include groceries. And people are always like, well, that's something I need to have is groceries. And the conversation is always, have you ever gone into the grocery store or Costco without a list when you're hungry and when you're tired?
You buy everything.
You buy everything
No discretion,
and
and
maybe a hot tub,
yeah, yeah, and,
right?
you know, and I'd be very interested for you to get into the nuance of, like, because meticulous dollar for dollar tracking is an incredible labor. It's like putting things into more simplified categories is something I've been trying to move towards. And there's a lot of maybe debatable things that, like, for me, groceries is a discretionary spend, and I justify that by saying, yeah, it's a mandatory, but it's not like rent at the
It's a
same time. Rent is
discretionary
this set
spend.
amount where
Absolutely.
I have an option when I go to Costco to buy a Kraft dinner or to buy, super fancy cheese Kraft dinner to get like the $20 cheese and make some like fancy Italian Kraft dinner. So that it has an element of discretion, I think, but I don't know if you share the same opinion.
It absolutely has an element of discretion for sure. So that becomes a spendable number that we're working with. So any of the discretionary expenses, I separate them out. So people are automatically dealing with two different bank accounts. And by the time we're finished, they could have 6 or 7 places where they're putting their money, because think of it kind of like an envelope
Envelopes, is it?
system, right?
Okay. Okay. So it does sound some similar to what how I classify expenses, where I have fixed expenses, I have variable expenses. Fixed expenses are expenses that must come out same, never changes every month. Your car insurance, your home insurance, your rent or your mortgage, your property taxes. Those are fixed. Variable are important, like groceries, gas, right? Gas is not fixed. I may spend $50 a week this week. I may spend 45 next week. I may spend 60. So I classify those into variable and then help me understand, okay, outside of the fix, which we know, or you're working with a client, you know exactly what that amount is. On the variable side, how are you then divvying things up in a way that it's still, you're not doing dollar for dollar trying to track every dollar spending, but you have guardrails around.
Yeah, that's a great word. I use that word a lot. So just to clarify, when I talk to people, I'm not talking about fixed and variable. I'm talking about committed, so that they have in their mind, I'm committed to paying these.
Okay.
Okay, small thing, but words matter. And how we come up with the spendable is we're looking at their income, their proximity to retirement, the amount of debt they have, how much cash flow they actually have. Okay. And I'm giving them a guideline. Now, one of the things that I go a step further is there could be things that some people would consider variable or discretionary. I always ask, are there any non negotiables on this list? Like if you
Mm.
cannot live without CrossFit, for instance, let's move it into committed. Let's not pretend you're not going to be paying for CrossFit. Are there any non negotiables? Right? So then we move that over. So then I know basically where we're at. Then it can be a little bit of a massaging technique where we're trying to figure out, okay, let's figure out what your weekly spend is going to be. And I always go with a weekly spend. If I say to someone, you've got $2,500 to spend monthly, they've blown through that money by week 3.
Absolutely.
If
That's a
I
good
say
idea,
you've got
actually.
$600 a week, that's all they're managing. And that's in a separate account.
I want to mention two things about what you guys were just talking about. So there's language, which I totally agree is super important. I love the word committed. And then there's, I guess you're using the envelope style, but it's electronic envelopes. A lot of banks now will give you unlimited free savings accounts that you can have as your envelopes. You can nickname them, but you need to make sure not to do transactions directly from them. Otherwise, it charges you $5 per. So you have to transfer it into the checking and use it from the unlimited checking account. But one of the things that I saw in the US with a company called SoFi or something like that, they had this spendable or safe to spend. I almost feel like there's even opportunity for some language improvement there because it doesn't mean we should spend it all. And I use this analogy where I was going to my friend's house one time. We were going to stop at McDonald's to get a Big Mac because I hadn't had a Big Mac in like 2 years. And then while we're in the parking lot, he turns around and he says, "Let's just barbecue at my house and save $10 each." And I thought to myself, am I actually going to save the $10 or is it going to sit in my spendable account and I'm just going to spend it on something else later? It's like deferred spending, where if there was some kind of cool technology where I could be like, press the button, didn't go to McDonald's, it magically takes the $10 out and gives it a job or allocates it, then I'm actually realizing the savings. The same way when I'll realize a loss by taking out money out of investment when it's down, we want to be able to realize a savings when we improve the behavior. Does that make any sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And I think people need to know themselves, right? They need to understand how they manage money. When I give them their guideline for the week, the goal isn't to spend every penny. This is your guideline, and let's see how you manage it. And go ahead, Sean.
No, so on that topic, so you mentioned that they may end up with like 5, 6 accounts. What's the typical breakdown of those things, right? Just on that train of thought of, okay, this is the guideline for this. What are the 6 accounts typically? Are they usually different or usually around the same?
Some of
Like,
them
what
will
does
be
that
the
look like?
same. For instance, an emergency account.
Okay.
Um, if there's a car on the horizon that they need to start saving for, we might have one for that. There's definitely a holiday fund and what I would call a joy jar. So a joy jar is and this is really great for couples. So you each have a joy jar and you determine the amount of money you can put in the joy jar, and it's a separate account. And so if William wants to go on a golf trip with his buddies and he's got enough money in his joy jar, he gets to go. And it doesn't impact any of the other financial decisions in the house. And if Sarah wants to buy a new bag or go to Las Vegas with her girlfriends and she's got enough money in her joy jar account, she gets to do that.
And are you doing combined joy
No,
jars for a
separate.
household, or is it sometimes
Yes,
separate, or
well, it can
it
be. I
depends
mean,
like
if
many
we
things?
might have a holiday account or we might have you know, a slush fund account. Really depends on the clients.
Yeah.
But definitely
Mhm.
the joy jars are separated.
I like the name Joy Jar because it's funny. My wife and I do the same thing, similar, where we have our budget for the month, and here's how much you transfer into your account. Do whatever you want to do with it. I have how much. This is how I do whatever I want. She doesn't need to be accountable to me. I don't need to be accountable to her.
Yeah, it's
We do
beautiful.
whatever we
It's a
want to do with
beautiful
it.
thing.
Sometimes I can save it and it ends up going back to her because I buy her something nice. And sometimes it's the same thing. She ends up saving it up, buying me something nice. But at least you have that freedom without having to look at your monthly budget or your weekly budget and say, shoot, I can't really get this and I really want it for myself.
Just
And
don't
there's no
spend the whole thing
surprises, right?
buying diamond underwear for the other one, because then you will get in some trouble.
Right. And there's no surprises, right? Because you didn't spend something out of the spendable account that your wife doesn't know about, and now she's short when she's running in to pick up some prescriptions for the kids, right? Like, that's
Right.
brutal.
I want to get a little bit. We've talked about the overarching, obviously, importance of the cash flow, but I really want to talk to the financial advisors here and focus in on that part of the conversation, because many advisors will overlook clients that don't yet have. And I know that, when they have somebody that's obvious, like a doctor just starting out, they will take those on as the Henrys, as they call them, the potential high income earners. But I had a client that was a lady that came over from the Philippines, super modest, worked two jobs, making about $75,000 a year. And she really, really accumulated, like, fast. And she became like, I think a lot of people would be shocked to see the whole story. And I may even have her on the podcast someday, but you never know who's going to be what type of lifestyle somebody's going to live, what type of accumulation and discipline they're going to be able to have. And there's actually a really interesting stat that 74% of high net worth client individuals globally say they would have stayed with their first financial advisor if they had received support earlier, even when they had very little to invest. And that doesn't mean only people that were obvious because they were the first year as a lawyer, the first year as a doctor, but people that are normal professionals, but ready to show that incredible intentionality.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, there are 6 pillars to financial planning, right? And financial management is the first pillar. And we tend, as professionals, to uh, push a product or push an investment or, guide people in that direction. The more time that we can spend in the financial management, educating them, helping them understand their cash flow, helping them understand where a budget would work, the more available money they're going to have without stress, so that then they can put it where it needs to go, and grow more wealth sooner,
Right.
right? The other thing about, I mean, listen, if it's clear that Canadians are struggling, we're carrying more debt than almost we've ever carried personally in this country. And that's across every walk of life. Canadians used to be savers, and now they are no longer savers. They are spenders. And there's a lot of pressure to spend. So it's a question of, how do we get them to start thinking about their money as the tool that it is, rather than I'm at the mercy of money. Money's holding all the power. We're the powerful ones. And the sooner that we can help our clients understand that they're in control of their money, the more opportunities there will be for that client and therefore for the advisor.
Speaking as a professional, I think there are two reasons why financial professionals or planners or do not focus on the cash flow planning side of things. Obviously, one, the old model of assets under management or selling product or insurance is a model that compensates for selling something. So I'm either selling investments or selling insurance. And so as a professional, I need to get paid. I'm not working for free. And so if I'm going through all this cash flow planning for my clients, how am I making money out of it? I think the shift needs to happen, which is something that happened for me maybe a little over 12 years ago now. Was one of the reasons why I actually left my original company was I was doing budgets, I was doing cash flow planning. And I remember my superior would say, "Why are you wasting all the time on that? You're not going to make any money on it." And that what for me made me rethink, okay, what's this value that I deliver to clients and how can I monetize that while still delivering more value that I'm charging? And so I think professionals need to start looking at, okay, what's your time worth? You name it, $250 an hour, $350, $400 an hour, whatever that is. How can you design a practice that allows you to still charge so you get compensated for the time, but do a proper job and the cash flow planning, doing something similar to what you've done or what you do right now is because, like Sheldon rightfully said, I believe there's a missed opportunity there because these are people that if you work with them and you're able to help them streamline their cash flow, they're potential accumulators that could help you in the back end as they grow their assets under management. So that's one side of the spectrum on the financial professional. My take on it is just, how do I get paid for that? I think the second piece of that, Sheldon alluded to it, is that, oh, my clients don't need that. And here we're talking about high net worth clients who are making a lot more money. And sometimes there is this thought in a planner's mind is, I don't want to tell my clients how to spend their money. So I'm not really going to go down that path of diving into their cash flow. And I think that's doing a disservice to the client because as a professional, well, someone who should be holistic, you need to be looking at everything. Even if you're not telling them what to do with the money, you're giving them guidelines that you and I both know a lot. And we sometimes don't, we take for value the knowledge that we have. And we don't realize by having insight into a client's cash flow, ideas that may come to our mind comes naturally to us, but to the
Yes.
client, it's not that natural. And that could be, and that suggestion, that idea could be something that could save a client hundreds of dollars a month, right? So professionals need to get to that point where you get over yourself and say, yes, every client, regardless of net worth, regardless of assets, regardless of their wealth, does need some level of cash flow planning. What am I doing about it? I don't know
Right.
what your take on that is.
Yeah. So, all really valid points that you're making. The compensation model makes it difficult. If somebody is selling the product, that's how they're getting paid. And yeah, what is my time worth? So, doing a basic cash flow plan could become part of your practice. What I do is a step farther. So, I'm adding coaching into that planning. Um, so, as an advisor, you have to decide, is this work I want to do? Or do I want to focus on assets under management because that's what I'm really great at? Or do I want to focus on insurance and tax planning with insurance because that's what I'm really great at? So I think also looking at your own, how you want to build your own practice is important. We don't know. You are correct when you say, sometimes we just assume people who are making a lot of money have got it together. And we don't really want to get in the weeds with those conversations, but we have no idea really whether they're using debt effectively. And if maybe we make some changes there, they now have an extra $800 a month to
Correct.
invest or to put towards their goals and values. So there are definitely missed opportunities. And I think, as you say, if we're holistically planning, we're either doing it ourselves or we're referring out for somebody else to help them.
And I think that's something advisors need to. I love what you said there is identify as a planner, as a professional, what is my core expertise? What do I want to focus on? And if what you want to focus on still falls short of the holistic planning, then what you ought to do as a professional is to bring in a network of people that fill in the gaps using some of the software that we use, like the sponsor of this podcast, Pocket Finance, which allows professionals to collaborate and bring in, okay, I want to focus on investment planning. I'm going to bring in Maura to do the cash flow planning, and here's how we're going to work things out. Or I'm going to bring in this gentleman who's going to focus on the insurance because this is what I want to focus on. I think advisors need to really start looking holistically at their practice and their spheres of influence and who they can bring on so that they can better serve their clients.
And I want to just jump on one thing before you get into that favorite part of what it is the centerpiece of my life has been generally in my mortgage practice, trying to be way more intentional than the other mortgage advisors and making sure to collaborate holistically. But clients don't show up as ideal; they grow into it. Financial professionals that guide growth build way deeper loyalty, way better retention, way more meaningful referrals. And I actually had an advisor friend in the eastern part of Canada who, really successful in insurance. He's a financial planner, a lot of financial planning. I don't know that he necessarily does a lot of investment management, but even with what he was doing, he said he showed me his like cash flow kind of financial management 101 thing that he created, and it's a memory I'll never forget. He's like, "See, this is what I just created. Created this news plan." He's like, "I don't want to do it. I don't want to do this, but I mean, like, I have to. I have to." But I think what we want to hone in on a little bit up here in the holistic and the collaboration is how more do you collaborate with other financial professionals? And let's make sure that the financial professionals understand that you don't have to take that on. You can focus on what you love to do and find someone, whether it's Mora or someone else that you can trust to hand those clients off to. Make sure that there's an understanding so that there's no stepping on toes. If the cash flow focused person happens to potentially have some overlap, that's just a simple conversation. It doesn't mean that it's somebody you can't engage. And how do you or do you collaborate with a financial professional? If I'm a Sean, an AUM and a financial planner guy, can I reach out to Maura and say, Maura, I'd love to engage you for the clients that I feel this would be meaningful and try to position it in front of all clients as an opportunity because it is important from every household. Can we establish some type of working relationship?
Hmm. So, yes, I do collaborate with other financial professionals who, for whatever reason, they don't want to do that work or it's beyond their scope of practice. And there's nothing wrong with saying that to your clients. This is what I'm really great at, and these people are really great at these other things. And I'd like to introduce them to you so that you've got a whole team behind you. So whatever question we need to have addressed, we've got somebody that we can. I'll be your quarterback, but we've got someone who can help you. So the other thing about, it is a financial world can be very competitive, right? And we I mean, we've all been to the meetings, the people who've got massive money under AUM, or they're getting all the recognition. They're getting all of that kind of stuff. So it is competitive. It can feel competitive. The thing that I look for is, can I trust this person? Does this person work with integrity? And the other thing that I focus on is not everything has to be, if I send you a referral, you send me a referral. If it's client centric and we're really doing the best for the client, what's the best thing for the client? Because I am in the business to serve people. My feeling has always been, if I serve people in the right way, it will come back to me.
It always does.
So, can you trust them? And yes, having that conversation. If an investment advisor gives me a client and says, hey, they need some help with their cash flow, and I uncover $1,500 a month, not unusual, $2,000 a month, not unusual.
Universal life insurance.
Uh, yeah, universal life insurance. And now we're putting that money to work. That person is now going back to that investment advisor and saying, I've got $1,200 a month. What am I going to be doing with it?
That's the
Right?
way it should be.
That's the way it should be.
Well, and what a great way to find the opportunity to find those lost dollars. It's actually there's a lot more stickiness to a team. I've lived it. I've seen it in other professionals that really live that model, which isn't as sometimes people think they're living that model because they have cute little referral relationships, but that's not the same as a strategic, dedicated partnership team. And clients who do receive that coordinated advice from a team of professionals are not only significantly more sticky, but they're up to 3 times or more likely to follow through on financial recommendations. And all we all need as financial professionals, whether you're doing mortgages, whether you're doing insurance, whether you're doing investments, whether you're doing cash flow, especially, I would think the most difficult one to kind of have that ongoing engagement is intentionality. Intentionality is king. That can bring you from a rough financial situation, the same as even monitoring, our physical health and what we eat and when we exercise. The intentionality is what's going to bring the victory. But what better way than to have a team of professionals that you're able to coordinate with? And thank you for using that word. I continue to hear that word, and I'm going to repeat that word: quarterback. Um, you need a quarterback in those right areas of your life. Otherwise, you're doing what most people are doing, which is freestyling, and you end up using. And I've had this conversation so many times with so many people, so I hate to bring the vulgarity into it, but you get to payday, and without really much thoughtfulness, it's payday, right? So it's F it. I deserve it. It's surf and turf time. But then the day before payday, you're back to ice cube soup.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. So that's one thing I talk about. Let's not pretend you're not going out for dinner this week. Let's not pretend you're not going out for dinner this month. Let's not pretend you're not going on holidays. Let's
Let's allocate
plan
that.
for those things.
Yeah.
So, learning to give yourself permission for a couple of things, to become a student of money, really allowing yourself, we have this sort of
That means following
societal.
any wingnut on Instagram that's talking about money, right?
That's right, right? So become a student of money. And that means doing your own research, understanding, learning to ask the right questions, integrating that into your process, integrating that, and then learning the next thing that you need to learn, right? So allow yourself to become a student of money. And it's a lifelong thing, because as your life moves through the phases of your life, you're going to need to know different things about money. If you don't have any children, it's different than when you do have children. If you're buying a bigger home, it's different than if you're buying your first condo. If you're downsizing your home, if you're moving into retirement, all different conversations. So what you needed to know back then may not be what you need to know now. So that's the one thing. The other thing is giving yourself permission to shift your behavior, because this is the way it's always been, can really hold you in place. And understanding that you're making these decisions. We all make decisions. We may think we're making them logically, but in the heat of the moment, emotions come into play.
We make them emotionally and try to justify logically.
That's right.
Tons of spending decisions emotionally. I'd say it's like my number, especially with like eating, which affects the finances and I'm gonna totally throw myself out in the line here. My wife's gonna hear this because she's in the next room. But sometimes if I've had a rough day,
Mhm.
a really rough day, and I'm very good generally at managing stress, but this is something that'll affect my finances and my physical health. And I'm very sedentary, unfortunately, a lot of the time sitting at a desk. It's late at night, everybody's asleep, I'm awake, I finished my workday, I'm all by myself in the living room and it's oh geez, it would feel so much better. I would feel so much better if I could just get some Chinese batter chicken and a Cinnabon. Or going to Costco, and Costco is a great place for it. It's, I mean, the deals that they have, their merchandising is fantastic, and sometimes that whether it's just a new stupid little whatever it is, it's we comfort ourselves with that. We comfort ourselves with food, and that has a financial impact, and we comfort ourselves with those little, well, we're gonna get the grocery stuff, but there's this, one little thing, and it's like, I don't know, it's comforting our psychology and our emotions. It really just ends up being empty, moment of gratification at the end of the day. But that I think that I've had that conversation with a lot of people.
Mm. So there's a lot in what you just said. So one of the things that I would ask people to ask themselves, why am I rewarding myself with things that are not improving my life, my lifestyle, or my health?
Well,
I
I
like
want you
that.
to phrase something to financial professionals in that regard. A
Uh,
little bit tougher because again, we are focused on talking to the professionals and how they should be engaging their clients.
yes, but you know what? You need to ask yourself those questions first as a
Well, and even the
financial
financial
professional,
advisors
because
need to ask
you
themselves
because
questions. I don't
every
remember what the statistic was, but there was like a large number of financial planners that don't even have a financial plan in
of
North
course,
America.
Yep.
yeah, 100%. So that's the coaching around that. It's like when we're feeling bad, we have a drink. When we're celebrating, we have a drink, right? It's like it doesn't really matter what it is. We're giving ourselves permission to just do the thing we want to do. And I'll come back to the
Regardless of
word
the
that Sean
impact.
was using earlier, putting the guardrails in place so that you're managing your behavior, so that you're slowing the roll down, right? So if you know, okay, n- n- one of my clients actually said, "You have taken all the joy out of Costco for me." And I said, "Well, that really wasn't my
Not
intention."
possible. They still have the $1.50 hot dogs.
He just doesn't go anymore. He's like, "You know what? What I found was I was going and I was enjoying it in the moment. And then I was seeing the impact of the other things that we had decided to do with our money, and it didn't make sense for me anymore." So I didn't take the joy out. What he did was he started making a behavior change, and he
Mm,
realized there's a reason why Costco looks like a warehouse, because they want you to think you're getting a good deal. There's a reason why I'm going to Costco to save all the money I can on my groceries. Great. But you've got to walk through the gauntlet of everything else before you get to the groceries.
True, and you haven't extracted the joy. You've inserted the
IKEA
sobriety.
is the worst at that. They make you walk through the whole store.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're smart. Like they spend millions and billions of dollars understanding human behavior, right? So, and social media impacts us, and the desire to fit in impacts us. So, what if someone is talking to a client, having compassion for what the client's up against is really important. And just acknowledging, hey, I get that it's really hard to manage with your busy lifestyle. It's hard to manage your day-to-day expenses.
Well, that
Uh,
little input right there, I mean, expressing the empathy is such a missed opportunity in so many industries. But go ahead, Sean.
no, I think working with human behavior rather than trying to work against human behavior often has the biggest effect, right? Recognizing, yes, I am going to go out and eat. I am going to feel tired and not want to do this. So let's I know myself. So yes, I may want to modify that behavior a little bit, but rather than try to change that behavior, like you said, how can we put all these expenses into categories and keep them within a certain number or have those guardrails around that so you can still do that, but you're mindful that this is the limit you have on those. Like for instance, when I do cash flow planning for my family, I look and say, okay, these are groceries, are things we need to buy. These are other things, and I have $800 for this or $300 for this for the next 2 weeks. Once it's done, it's done.
That's right.
So I can spend, or my wife can spend and buy those things, but that's the card, and it's on a just like you said, it's on a separate card. It's not part of my whole budget where I'm just spending. I end up spending more money than I need. Once that card is done, until next paycheck, if it's not refilled, I gotta wait.
That's right.
Well, there's two questions I want to ask both of you, and I'll get you to start the answer on each one, Sean, and get you to finish off more as we conclude the podcast. Number one, and this is something that I've seen some advisors do, some of them that I've engaged personally, and something I try to do a lot as a mortgage advisor. And obviously, not everybody's going to be comfortable to the same level. But when people see people like yourselves that are financial advisors, they think, wow, this person has everything together. Their financial life is absolutely perfect. It's been perfect from the day they became a financial advisor. And some of the best ways to get people to open up is to share a little bit of your own story. If you've ever, hypothetically, God forbid, you ever had one hiccup in your life, and do you guys ever utilize that? Do you think that that's a good method to become a little bit more relatable to clients? So go ahead. I'll start with you, Sean, and then get more to throw some input on that.
Like you said, I think telling your personal story humanizes you, that even though you're a financial professional, it doesn't mean that you don't have those gaffes that everybody else has. I know what to do, doesn't mean I always do it perfectly. No, right? I've gotten into debt when I know I shouldn't get into debt. I've bought something that I I've I wanted emotionally, but then justified it logically. I think the key is to identifying those and retracing your steps. And so for me, that's how I humanize and say, I make this, I have the same mistakes. And that's why I'm accountable. I'm accountable to my wife. My wife is accountable to me. And a key step with in realizing your financial goals is having that accountability. And so as your planner, hopefully I can be that to you. But even beyond myself, is your relationship with your spouse, if I'm working with a couple, strong enough that you can be each other's accountability partner, or do you have somebody else, some way to help hold you accountable? Because it does holding you accountable doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, but it just makes you helps you recognize when you do and make course correction so you can get back on track.
So would
Personally,
you
that's how we
recommend
handle.
to advisors, though, Sean, that they should at least, they don't have, I mean, obviously advisors want to represent themselves a certain way a lot of the time, but they can pick a moment from their college days or even better during their financial advisory life where even if they don't have to be like, oh yeah, I've been a mess at times. They could just say, here's some examples of when I've fallen into that same nature that we all can.
I think the key is being authentic at the end of the day, right? And obviously being authentic doesn't mean you bear out your soul and you say everything that, but is picking what to share in a way that actually helps the client without shaming them, without
Feeling relatable.
also, right, feeling relatable, without also maybe not giving as much information out there as you more than what you feel comfortable giving out, right? So there's a balance with that. But I think professionals should endeavor to do that because it helps you more relatable and it shows you're more authentic.
Or is this a good or a bad idea for financial professionals? Are they outing themselves and losing that crafted persona and that posturing that they want to have as the the great financial wizards, or is this going to be some type of meaningful injection sometimes?
I agree with Sean. I think it really depends on what you feel comfortable sharing. You should never overshare if you're not comfortable, because that's going to come across, right? So you should look at the situation and see, how do I make myself relatable? Hey, listen, I was a single parent. I worked 2 jobs. I, you know, I have said to my son multiple times, I'd like you to learn from the financial mistakes that I made. And most of us learn from the financial mistakes we make. And what we want to do is learn from the financial mistakes that somebody else made so that we can see, okay, there's a better way to do it. So I'm quite comfortable sharing some of the mistakes or some of the situations I found myself in, but I don't share everything with every person. I think it really depends on the advisor. Having that ability to listen with compassion and without judgment is more important in my mind.
The judgment can be, I mean, it really can be the complete deterrent. So I want you to speak directly to financial professionals here more, and I want you to tell them if they want to take advantage of having that ecosystem of being able to offload that part that they don't feel is their number one skill set, or that they just don't have a desire to do. What does your business model look like, and how can they work with someone like you? And give us a shameless plug as to where you can be contacted if somebody wants to be sharp and to start working towards that next era in finance, which is very real and it's very much coming, where people that aren't collaborating holistically are going to start to lose clients to those that are, in my opinion.
Yeah, I actually think that that is really true. I think collaboration is going to be the next big wave in this industry, because the reputation that financial advisors have is, there was a new survey that came out in the States. I think we're fourth. We're above used car salesmen and lawyers, and you know we've got to improve that, right? So the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and clients can also find me on LinkedIn. You get a good idea of how I talk. I do videos, I write newsletters, I write content. That's the best place to contact me. I am a fee for service planner when it comes to cash flow, and that depends on the complexity of the situation, and it depends on how many coaching sessions the client wants to engage me for. And in the case of a business owner, we do that as 2 separate engagements. So we handle their personal cash flow first, and then we disentangle the personal and business. The That's a simple, you know, referral to me. I like to have a personal referral. I'd like you to speak with Maura. My first session is always my first meet is always complimentary, because I am not the right coach for every person. So I want people to feel comfortable. I want the advisor to feel comfortable. And I want the advisor to know, okay, when we're done, let's tee them back over to you. And we also have a conversation with the client and say, do you want me to keep your advisor apprised of where we are, or do we want to have a meeting all together? However that wants to work, right? Get
A
everybody
critical
on the
piece
same
of
page.
collaboration, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll close out by saying, and I'm going to drive this home on every podcast we ever do. The two biggest opportunities that financial professionals have to be relevant, to have their clients be sticky, to have their clients be successful, to have their clients refer, and really to build a great name for having great client outcomes in a successful business, is that very real future that all of the reputable publications are talking about. It goes crazy on LinkedIn and all the comments with financial advisors. That holistic collaboration and building those trusted ecosystem, not cute little referral relationships, but really meaningful ones where ideally you're doing like you just ended off in your last words, which is making sure, hey, and I try to do that as a mortgage professional. You won't really see that on the mortgage professional side. Hey, there was a client that, I was dealing with a couple days ago. He's putting a huge down payment on a home, but probably like a 90% payment on a over $1 million home. And I said, do you have a financial advisor? Good income, no debt. I said, what's their name? I reached out to them. I said, I would like to prompt you to make sure that if there's any additional opportunity, tax conversations, anything else, I want to prompt you over. And I got the client's consent to make sure to send you a summary of, regardless of what you advise should be the case at the end of the day, what that mortgage and mortgage payment and et cetera is going to look like. Cause I want to make sure that they're getting holistic advice. And the other part is making sure technologies that you're taking advantage of. There's so much technologies. AI is never going to replace the relationships and the human aspect. And if you're focused on holistic collaboration, if you're focused on technology, you're going to be the stars of the next era in finance, and you're going to have a land grab of clients from other advisors. So, a big thank you to you, Maura, for showing us how powerful for financial professionals, making sure to, whether they're going to do it themselves, think about it in a different way, approach it in a way that maybe can be a little bit less burdensome when you're not doing this meticulous, almost impossible to keep sustained little budget, and be wise about, find the people like Maura to engage with, and if you want to, and sorry, reminding us that financial planning isn't just for the wealthy, it's for the willing and for the intentional. And everybody should have that opportunity because those will be the most loyal people. And a good example of that is when I was just out of high school, I had a $1,500 BMO card, never had a credit card, no financial advice, messed up my credit on that card. And eventually, when I got that paid off, I eventually went to Long and McQuaid, big up Long and McQuaid, it's a music store, and they made an exception to give me a guitar, which I wanted so badly, and they extended that credit. And I spent over $15,000 with them on their music stuff, and I was religiously loyal to them. I saw some things sometimes being advertised in other places for a little bit lower cost, but I was dedicated to them because they showed that they were willing to take me on when maybe I didn't feel as, and maybe really overall I wasn't necessarily as worthy as I should have been. So, it's very important to build that loyalty, and it doesn't have to be a big burden on your practice. And you can use great people like Maura. So, if you want to learn more about Maura's work or explore her practical values based approach to coaching, follow her on LinkedIn, Maura Shaftoe, where she does show videos, newsletters, and posts about money in a straightforward and compassionate way. And we thank our co-host and Sean and Maura for taking time out of your day. And thank you so much for listening to Finance Village. And we'll see you in the next episode.